We're tracking a chilling shift tonight in the case of Nancy Guthrie, and what investigators are uncovering is turning the entire narrative upside down. 46 days. That's how long the 84-year-old vanished without a trace from her quiet home in the Catalina foothills, just outside Tucson. But what's surfacing now doesn't look like chance, and it definitely doesn't look random. This is something colder, something deliberate. Federal agents have intensified their operation, and what they're piecing together is far more disturbing than anyone expected. The timeline isn't just expanding, it's exposing a plan that may have been in motion long before anyone realized. Let's break down what's coming to light. Investigators have now confirmed surveillance footage pulled from multiple cameras across the neighborhood. And what it shows is deeply unsettling, an unidentified man circling Nancy's property as far back as mid-January. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. The same figure appearing, disappearing, then returning again. Analysts say his behavior wasn't random. It was precise, controlled, calculated, the kind of movement you'd expect from someone studying a target, not stumbling onto one. In one clip, he's carrying a dark backpack, his posture tense, guarded. Experts believe there may be a concealed holster hidden beneath his clothing. But then something even more unsettling happens. On a different day, he comes back, this time without the gear. No visible equipment, no urgency, just calm, moving through the area like he belongs there. Like he's already memorized every corner, every entry point, every blind spot. One analyst described it in a way that's hard to shake. This wasn't someone exploring. This was someone returning. And that changes everything. Because now these appearances aren't being dismissed as coincidence. Not anymore. Investigators are officially calling it what it looks like: pre-abduction surveillance. A pattern of repeated visits, studying routines, testing reactions, quietly identifying weaknesses, all before the night of February 1st ever arrived. But here's the moment that pushed this case into an entirely new and darker direction. Forensic specialists recently performed what's known as a chip-off recovery on a damaged Nest camera, a device that until now was believed to hold nothing useful. They physically extracted the memory, read it piece by piece, and what they found rewrote the timeline. Recovered footage shows the same suspect standing at Nancy's front door on January 11th, 3 full weeks before she disappeared. That is now the earliest confirmed sighting, and it reveals something investigators didn't fully grasp before. This wasn't rushed. This wasn't spontaneous. This was patient. And if you look closely at the dates, a pattern begins to emerge, one that feels anything but accidental. January 11th, January 24th, and then the overnight stretch from January 31st into February 1st, the exact window when Nancy vanished. Every single sighting lands on a weekend. Behavioral analysts say that detail matters more than people think, because according to them, this pattern aligns with something deeply unsettling, what they call a weekend predator cycle. A rhythm, a routine. And if they're right, then this wasn't just planned. It was practiced. What investigators believe they're looking at now is even more unsettling, a profile that doesn't fit the chaos of a random offender, but the precision of someone living a double life. This points to someone who blends into a normal routine during the week, then slips into something far darker on weekends. Someone making intentional trips into Tucson with a purpose. Not wandering, not passing through. Arriving with a plan and leaving without a trace. That alone eliminates an entire category of suspects. Not a drifter, not a passerby. This is someone familiar with the area. Someone who understands the rhythm of the neighborhood. Disciplined enough to stick to a pattern. Patient enough to observe, wait, and strike only when everything aligns. And because of that, investigators are quietly shifting their lens. They're no longer just looking at outsiders. They're digging into individuals who could seamlessly exist in plain sight. People connected to local service jobs, construction crews, short-term rental networks. Anyone who could move through that community without raising even the slightest suspicion. But tonight, a new development has pushed this case even further into chilling territory. On the morning of January 31st, just hours before Nancy Guthrie vanished, witnesses reported something that, at first glance, seemed completely ordinary. A sedan, parked along Via Entrada, the narrow stretch running behind the property. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious, just there. But that's exactly what made it stand out. It didn't belong to any resident. It wasn't moving. It wasn't doing anything at all, except staying far longer than it should have. Around 10 a.m., just sitting in a place where no one had a reason to be. And now, investigators believe that moment may have been critical. Right now, teams are conducting an intense 90-minute canvass of that exact block, knocking on doors, pulling footage, searching every possible angle for a glimpse of a license plate, a vehicle make, even a shadow behind the wheel. Anything. because the working theory is deeply unsettling. That this wasn't random parking. This was a final check. A daylight confirmation pass. Someone driving by one last time, making sure Nancy was still home. Making sure nothing had changed. Verifying that the conditions were perfect before coming back under the cover of darkness to carry out the plan. And as this unfolds, every digital lead is being hunted down simultaneously. Retail analysts have zeroed in on the backpack seen in earlier footage, tracing it to a specific 25-liter hiking model sold across major stores in the region. On its own, it's nothing special. Cheap, common, easy to ignore. But here's where it gets interesting. Investigators noticed a localized spike in purchases of that exact model across the greater Tucson area in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. That pattern, that timing, it's too precise to dismiss. Now, transaction records, loyalty accounts, and even nearby cellular data are all being cross-referenced in real time, building a web of connections out of something that once seemed insignificant. Because in a case where physical evidence is scarce, even the smallest purchase can become a breakthrough. And while all of this unfolds behind the scenes, the atmosphere in the Catalina foothills has completely changed. Neighbors who once waved without thinking now hesitate. Every unfamiliar face feels like a question. Every parked car feels like a warning. And the silence in that neighborhood, it's no longer peaceful. It's heavy. Federal agents are now moving street by street, door by door, armed with enhanced still images pulled from the surveillance footage. And the mood across the Catalina foothills has shifted in a way that's impossible to ignore. What used to feel calm, controlled, almost insulated, now feels tense. Heavy. People aren't just living their lives anymore. They're rewinding them. Replaying moments they once dismissed without a second thought. That delivery driver back in January. The landscaper whose face they never really looked at. The weekend renter who suddenly vanished right as the headlines exploded. Utility workers. Contractors. Strangers who blended in so perfectly, no one questioned them. Until now. Because now, every memory feels suspicious. The federal presence has become constant. Unmarked vehicles stationed at quiet intervals. Agents moving with purpose, knocking, questioning, documenting. Even forensic teams have returned to locations already cleared weeks ago, combing through them again, as if something critical was missed the first time. And that alone sends a clear message. This is no longer just a missing person case involving Nancy Guthrie. This is something far more calculated. A full-scale reconstruction of a crime that appears to have been executed with chilling precision. Now, there's one thread investigators are treating with extreme urgency, and it may be one of the most revealing pieces of this entire puzzle. The construction site. Less than 200 yards from Nancy's front gate, a massive luxury home was under active construction throughout January and into the very days leading up to her disappearance. At first glance, it's just another project. Noise, movement, workers coming and going. But look closer. The scaffolding, the elevated platforms. From those heights, there's a direct, unobstructed view into surrounding properties, including Nancy's backyard. Think about what that means. Someone standing up there wearing a reflective vest would have had a perfect vantage point. They could see when her porch lights flicked on each evening. Track how often cars came and went. Observe the glow of lights inside her home late at night. They could study her routine without ever stepping foot on her property. And the most unsettling part? To anyone passing by, that person would look completely normal. Just another worker doing his job. Invisible in plain sight. Investigators aren't taking that lightly. They've already secured extensive personnel records tied to that site, from general contractors down to subcontractors, electricians, plumbers, drywall crews, landscapers, even day laborers who showed up hoping for quick cash work. Every single name is now being processed. Criminal histories, immigration records, travel data, all of it being analyzed in a non-stop, around-the-clock effort to identify anything that doesn't fit. Because the logic is undeniable. A construction site like that offers two critical advantages: elevation and cover. Whoever had access could spend days, even weeks, observing the property from above. Park a vehicle nearby without raising suspicion. Move freely through adjacent areas under the guise of routine work, measuring, inspecting, retrieving tools. If the suspect was connected to that site in any way, then he didn't just have access. He had the perfect position. But what investigators are now uncovering goes even deeper, into a digital layer that may tie directly to everything happening on the ground. And tonight, this part of the case is being treated as one of the most critical breakthroughs so far. In the final weeks before she vanished, Nancy Guthrie confided in people she trusted. Something wasn't right. Something was bothering her. And whatever she sensed, it may have been real. In the final weeks before everything went dark, Nancy Guthrie started noticing something she couldn't explain, and it wasn't happening outside her home. It was happening inside her digital life. Her Facebook Messenger account wasn't behaving normally. Messages appeared that she had never typed. Conversations showed activity she didn't remember. And then came the alerts, logins from unfamiliar devices at times that made no sense. One of them hit at 3:17 a.m., a time when she would have been asleep, vulnerable, unaware. Task Force analysts later confirmed those intrusions weren't constant, but they were deliberate. Short bursts of access, repeated over time, and always following the same pattern. Late at night, when she was least likely to notice, experts brought in to examine the activity were quick to draw a disturbing conclusion. This wasn't random hacking. This wasn't someone casting a wide net, hoping to catch a password. This was targeted. Someone was inside her account for a reason, watching, learning, looking for patterns, who visited her, how often she left the house, whether anyone stayed overnight, whether she was truly alone, or just appeared to be. And then investigators noticed something that changed everything. The timing. Those digital intrusions, they almost always happen late Friday nights, bleeding into early Saturday mornings. The exact same window as the physical surveillance around her home. That overlap wasn't ignored. Behavioral analysts are now treating the online activity and the in-person stakeouts as two halves of the same operation. One digital, one physical, both synchronized, both focused on a single target. If that link holds, it paints a terrifying picture. Someone capable of moving between worlds, quietly watching from a distance, while also slipping into a private life without leaving a trace. A combination that is rare, calculated, and far more advanced than what investigators typically see in cases like this. And it's forcing them to rethink everything about who they're hunting. But as the investigation deepens, another layer of tension has begun to surface, not from the suspect, but from within the investigation itself. Behind closed doors, friction between federal and local authorities has started to spill into the open. And it may have cost them time they didn't have. Sources close to the case describe a chaotic start. Critical early hours where coordination broke down, where local deputies reportedly held on to key evidence, scene documentation, witness statements, citing protocol, while pursuing leads that federal analysts later called distractions. Those early decisions are now under formal scrutiny. Some senior agents have gone further, describing the initial response as fragmented, even driven by internal pride rather than the evidence itself. And now, that tension has reached the public. At the center of it is Sheriff Nanos, whose composed media appearances stand in stark contrast to the growing frustration from residents, victim advocates, and even insiders working the case. A recall movement is gaining momentum. Petition organizers say more than 60,000 signatures have already been collected, with a special election expected later this spring. Supporters argue accountability is overdue. Defenders insist the noise is only making things worse, distracting from the search, dividing focus when unity is needed most. And that debate, it's only getting louder. But just as that tension builds, a discovery in the desert has sent shockwaves through everyone connected to this case. And tonight, it's changing everything. Last week, amateur searchers combing a shallow desert wash near the subdivision stumbled onto something they weren't expecting. Scattered in the sandy channel, the kind that carries monsoon runoff along the edge of the neighborhood, they found a small collection of items. Dust-covered tan capri pants, a pair of slip-on shoes, a worn knee brace, and then something far more disturbing. A heavy quilted bedspread, folded tightly, almost deliberately. Investigators immediately focused on that detail, and for one critical reason. Back at Nancy's home, blood evidence found on the front porch had a strange characteristic. It didn't trail off. It didn't fade. It stopped. Abruptly. Cleanly. Forensic experts say that kind of pattern often means one thing. The victim was quickly wrapped, covered, and moved. So finding a folded blanket in a nearby wash? That's not something they can ignore. Since then, lab teams have confirmed trace biological material on that bedspread, consistent with human blood. DNA results are still pending, slowed by exposure to harsh desert conditions. But then came another finding, one that's even harder to dismiss. Microscopic fibers recovered from the knee brace at the site match fibers embedded in the blood spatter collected from Nancy's porch. A direct link from her front door to that desert wash. Officials are still being cautious. They haven't officially confirmed the items belong to Nancy. They could, in theory, be unrelated. But the combination what was found where it was found and what the forensic evidence is beginning to show has pushed this discovery to the very top of the priority list. Search operations have now expanded across the entire wash system. Cadaver dogs are being deployed. Ground-penetrating radar is scanning beneath the surface. Teams are moving downstream, tracking how seasonal floods may have carried evidence further into the desert. Because at this point, this isn't just a search anymore. It's a race against time and against the elements to uncover the truth before it disappears completely. On the financial side of this case, a pattern has surfaced, and it points once again to something far more calculated than a crime of opportunity. In the 6 weeks leading up to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, a series of cash withdrawals began quietly unfolding across multiple bank branches. At first glance, nothing unusual, but look closer. Every single transaction was kept just under $9,000, carefully below the threshold that would trigger automatic federal reporting. Not once, not twice, 7 times, across 7 weeks, adding up to more than $40,000. That's not coincidence. That's discipline. And when investigators mapped those withdrawals, the pattern became even more disturbing. Geolocation data places several of those transactions within a tight radius, right around the construction site and the neighborhood where Nancy lived. In multiple instances, the dates line up perfectly with the same days the suspect was captured on surveillance near her home. 2 timelines moving in sync. Then came another digital thread. Cellular analysts identified a single prepaid burner phone, a device that repeatedly pinged towers along that same corridor during the exact late-night hours when the suspect was appearing near Nancy's porch. Same place, same time, over and over again. And then silence. After February 1st, the device went completely dark. No signals, no movement, nothing. Investigators don't see that as coincidence. They see it as a decision, a deliberate shutdown, marking the shift from preparation to execution. Now, there's another detail worth revisiting because it reveals something critical about the person behind all of this. The camera. Nancy's Nest doorbell camera was disabled at exactly 1:47 a.m. on the night she vanished. But it's not just that it was disabled, it's how. Forensic reconstruction shows the connection was cut in under 12 seconds. 12 seconds. That's not someone guessing in the dark. That's not trial and error. That's precision. Whoever did it knew exactly where the device was mounted, how it was installed, and where its power source could be accessed. That level of familiarity has shifted the investigation in a very specific direction, toward people who had legitimate access to the home. Service technicians, maintenance workers, electricians, including the contractor who completed a minor upgrade inside the residence just weeks earlier. Every single name tied to any service call over the past year has now been pulled into the investigation. Their movements reconstructed, their timelines analyzed, and while no arrests have been made yet, something has changed. Investigators now have a shortlist, a focus group of individuals whose schedules, vehicle records, and digital footprints align in ways that are becoming harder to ignore with the surveillance sightings and even that mysterious sedan spotted on Via Entrada the morning of January 31st. But then comes one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in this entire case. Because even in silence, Nancy's body left behind a timeline. Her pacemaker, the implanted cardiac device, transmitted its final signal at 2:28 a.m., exactly 41 minutes after the camera went dark. Medical experts working alongside the task force say that window matters more than people realize. An 84-year-old woman with a known fragile heart condition would not be able to endure a prolonged struggle without triggering abnormal rhythms. Those irregularities would have appeared in the pacemaker data almost immediately, but they didn't. There are no early distress signals, no prolonged spikes, just a clean, compressed timeline, from camera disabled to silence. 41 minutes. That suggests something chilling. The entry was fast, the control was immediate, and whatever happened next happened quickly. Now, medical consultants are narrowing it down to 2 primary theories, both of them pointing toward the same terrifying conclusion. This wasn't chaotic. This was controlled. Investigators now believe the final moments may have unfolded in one of 2 terrifying ways. Either overwhelming force was applied the instant entry was made, or a chemical restraint was used almost immediately, shutting down any chance of resistance before it could even begin. Either scenario leads to the same chilling conclusion. Nancy never had a real chance to fight back. But outside the investigation, the emotional pressure inside Tucson is beginning to crack. The community has split. Candlelight vigils still flicker at the entrance to the Catalina foothills, but the feeling has changed. What was once unity now feels strained. Some residents are growing frustrated, worn down by weeks of roadblocks, drones overhead, and constant federal presence that has turned everyday life into something unrecognizable. Others are asking a harder question. How did no one see this coming? Because if investigators are right, someone was watching that neighborhood for weeks, moving in plain sight, studying routines, and no one stopped it. That tension has only fueled the political firestorm building around Sheriff Nanos. The recall petition has now surged past 90,000 signatures, with a special election locked in for late spring. Some believe the pressure will force accountability. Others argue it's distracting from the only thing that matters, finding Nancy. But one thing is certain. This case is no longer just local. It has exploded into a national obsession. Serious investigators, true crime analysts, and online conspiracy communities have all collided, flooding tip lines with everything from credible leads to theories so extreme they blur the line between speculation and chaos. And in the middle of all of it is a family being pushed to its limit. Those closest to Nancy Guthrie say this is the most brutal phase yet. Public statements have become rare, controlled, each appearance carrying the visible weight of exhaustion and a fragile kind of hope that hasn't completely broken, even after 46 days without answers. The $1.2 million reward still stands, but there has been no verified proof of life since the early, unconfirmed ransom contacts during the first week. Behind the scenes, federal negotiators remain ready, quietly maintaining channels for any real communication, while sifting through a relentless wave of imposters and extortion attempts that come with this level of attention. And then there's Nancy's daughter, a familiar face on American morning television, now caught in a storm she never asked for. Every appearance she makes is dissected, judged, twisted. Online voices analyzing her tone, her posture, her expressions, turning grief into suspicion. Conspiracy theories have spiraled out of control, dragging her husband's past into narratives that range from political retaliation to claims that the entire event was staged. Investigators have repeatedly shut those theories down, called them what they are, distractions. But the noise doesn't stop. And for a family already living through fear and uncertainty, it's become another layer of pain. Still, her message has changed. What started as a general plea for help has become something far more personal, direct, emotional, unfiltered. A daughter speaking not to the public, but to whoever has her mother. A promise to listen, to protect, to do whatever it takes if it means bringing her home alive. And when you step back and look at everything uncovered tonight, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Whoever is responsible for what happened to Nancy Guthrie didn't act on impulse, didn't stumble into opportunity. This was studied. He watched the property multiple times across weeks, not once, but repeatedly. He accessed her digital life on the same weekend schedule, gathering information he couldn't see from the outside. He may have used a nearby construction site as a perfect observation post, giving him both visibility and cover. He withdrew cash in calculated amounts designed to avoid detection. He carried a burner phone and discarded it the moment the plan was complete. He disabled a security camera in under 12 seconds, in the dark. Every step deliberate, every move controlled. And that leaves investigators and everyone watching this case with one haunting realization. This wasn't luck. This was precision. He removed an 84-year-old woman from a secured home in just 41 minutes. And when he left almost nothing behind. Every move speaks for itself: preparation, patience, local awareness, and a level of confidence that feels dangerously close to arrogance. The kind that only comes from rehearsing every detail long before the night it actually happens. And the most unsettling part? That person is out there right now, living normally, blending in. He has a face, one that appeared on multiple cameras across that neighborhood over multiple weeks. He has a vehicle, the same one seen sitting on Via Entrada the morning of January 31st. He has a past, one that may connect directly to that construction site overlooking the property. He made purchases in this region. He withdrew cash from nearby ATMs. He carried a burner phone that tracked his every move until he decided it was time to erase it. This isn't a ghost. This is a person, and someone knows who he is. Someone has seen that face. Someone worked beside him, spoke to him, passed him without realizing what they were looking at. And right now, they may be holding on to a detail that feels insignificant, but could be everything. The FBI task force is chasing every lead at once tonight. Behavioral profilers, cyber forensic experts, financial analysts, even forensic genealogists working through DNA still being processed in the lab. Different paths, same destination, all of them closing in on one name. But time is not on their side. The desert is vast and unforgiving. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She depends on daily medication. Her heart requires constant monitoring. She has now been gone for 46 days from the home she lived in for half a century. If you know anything at all, now is the moment. Call the FBI at 1-800-CALL. FBI 1-800-225-5324. Submit an anonymous tip at tips.fbi.gov or contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. You don't have to give your name. The reward remains at $1.2 million. Somewhere out there, someone is holding the missing piece that could bring this to an end. The porch still sits empty. The family is still waiting. And after 46 days, one question still echoes across Tucson tonight. Who was watching? Who was waiting? And where is she?